welcome to our International Women's Day event alongside BMO Celebrating Women on Boards, celebrating our 5 honorees across Canada. We have a few tech tips for you while we get everyone in the Zoom room and get settled. We ask that you please make sure your cameras are off and your mute is on. The session will be recorded, and the slides and the recording will be shared in a follow-up communication. Now I'd like to hand it over to Deborah Rosati, founder and CEO of Women Get On Board.
Thank you, Keisha. I want to begin our Women Get On Board virtual event today by acknowledging the land in which I live is in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. The Upper Canada Treaties cover this territory, is within lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon, WAPAM agreement, and is directly adjacent to the Haldimand Treaty territory. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to enjoy the natural surroundings of this territory. I encourage all of us to become actively involved in understanding why land acknowledgements are important, as well as understanding Indigenous histories and contemporary Indigenous issues in Canada. I also would like to take a moment to reflect on the current conflict in the Ukraine, which is causing a humanitarian crisis with far-reaching implications. We stand together to support our community with family and friends who have been deeply impacted. Welcome to our International Women's Day 2022, BMO Celebrating Women on Boards virtual event. And thank you, BMO Financial Group, for your partnership, your sponsorship, and your commitment. IWD, International Women's Day 2022, the theme is #BreakTheBias. Imagine a gender equal world. A world is free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge women's equality. Collectively, we can all break the bias. We are pleased to have Kona Goulet, Head Indigenous Equity and Inclusion at BMO Financial Group, to be our keynote speaker. She will share her personal and her professional experiences and highlight how to overcome barriers to equity and inclusion in the workplace. And she is a champion for cultural competency. She has, in her role, she has oversight and responsibility for end-to-end talent strategies to recruit, retain, and develop Indigenous talent at BMO. She is also accountable for the design and rollout of educational initiatives to raise cultural awareness of Indigenous people and history across the bank, and is Secretary of Indigenous Advisory Council at BMO, a council that comprises of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders that guide and advise BMO on issues related to employment, education, and economic empowerment. Previously, she was the Director for Inclusion, People Strategies and Insights, overseeing BMO's diversity and inclusion strategies across Canada. Kona's lived, worked, and studied in more than a dozen countries across 4 continents over the last 20 years. She joined BMO in 2014 after consulting for Indigenous Works on Indigenous inclusion policies for international corporations. Before that, Kona served as a Vice President, External Affairs for the White House Project based in New York City, where she advised Fortune 500 companies on diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies with a focus on women, and specifically women of color in leadership across industries with companies including Walmart, Google, Bank of America, Ernst & Young, Toyota, and more. I could continue, and reading her bio, she's quite accomplished. And you know what? I think we'll let Kona tell us her story. I know she has a lot to share today. So please welcome Kona Goulet. Over to you.
Minanaskamen, thank you, Deborah, for the welcome and opening acknowledgement of the land we live and work on. Tawau, everyone. Kona Nitsanigasun, Nenai Apitagosanina, Mistai Sagaigan Oche, Toronto Maganawegan, Egwa Bimo Natatosgan. I greet you today in Cree, the Indigenous language of my family, my father, and community. I'm Cree Métis, originally from La Ronge in northern Saskatchewan. I now live here in Toronto, where I work for BMO in my role as Head Indigenous Equity and Inclusion. Today, as we celebrate International Women's Day with the theme, Break the Bias, I want to share 3 Neenaw Cree concepts on slide 7. Atotamitawen, openness, Kiste Namitawen, respect, and Oske Si Chigehin, innovation. Today, I want to share with you 3 stories from my own career and life experiences that demonstrate how these 3 Cree values or concepts develop cultural competency, which I would argue is a critical leadership skill needed now more than ever to guide our corporations and institutions through the era of rapid social, cultural, technological, and global change that we live in. So let's start on slide 8 with Atotamitawen, which in Cree means openness to all things, people, animals, plants, our environment, and the world around us. And I want to share a picture from my family on slide 9. This photo was taken in 1950 of my father and his family on a traditional trapline near his home community of Cumberland House in northern Saskatchewan. Sitting in the middle of this picture is Namusham, my grandfather. Standing behind him, holding a baby, is Nokam, my grandmother. And on the far right, standing there at 4 years old, is Noktawe, my father. My father was raised in a traditional Neenaw Cree way of life, and his first language is Cree. He often tells us he didn't learn English properly until university. I love this photo because it reminds me of who I am and where I come from. My name Kona means snow in Cree. My parents gave me my name, so I would always stand strong and be proud of who I am and where I come from. I now pass on that strength of identity and pride to my own daughter, who you can see on slide 10. My family and I also gifted her with a Cree name, Iskoteo, which means fire, and she is a little fireball. You can see a picture of us on the left with her in a traditional moss bag, and on the right at the start of the pandemic, when she was home with me while I worked as a single mother and sole parent. So why does all this matter? At BMO, we like to say we're bankers, but we're people first. And it's who we are as people that connects us. Let's take a look at slide 11. We're all connected through our jobs, our networks, events like today's. Using the iceberg metaphor, we describe those as visible factors or characteristics above the waterline. But it's what's under the waterline that deeply makes us who we are and connects us to each other in deep and meaningful ways. So in summarizing Atotamitawen, which is openness to all things, think about how you as a leader are open to others. How do you reveal the invisible part of you, those characteristics below the waterline, to others? And how can you create opportunities for others to do the same? Inclusion isn't just telling people they can bring their full selves to work, it's showing them how you do. And that takes me to the second Cree concept or value I want to share with you today on slide 11, or slide 12, thank you, Keisha. Kiste Namitawen, which is respect. If people are open with us, we need to respect who they are. But unfortunately, given our history, many of us bring our unconscious biases with us to work. Breaking bias starts with education, because to see it, we need to understand it, label it, call it out. On slide 13, we see the impacts of bias in the research published in 2021 by Women Get On Board with IR Labs, as well as Osler's Board Diversity Disclosure Report. And I want to highlight a few of the facts, some of which you may be familiar. Women hold 23% of board seats among all TSX listed companies, and significantly fewer are held by Indigenous or women of color. In fact, only 16% of board seats for newly listed companies on the TSX and TSXV are occupied by women, and nearly a third of TSX listed companies don't even have goals for gender equity. Many of you know barriers and biases for women in leadership persist, and these barriers are often exacerbated for Indigenous, Black, and other marginalized groups. On slide 14, research on working women over the course of the pandemic by Prosperity Project found, for example, more than 2/3 of women still hold the majority of household duties, and working mothers were 2 times more likely to consider quitting their job during the pandemic. And the impacts of bias are real. Catalyst called out one impact as emotional tax. For example, 67% of Indigenous women were in the workplace say they are regularly on guard to experiences of bias and racism, which directly contributes to emotional tax. So how can Kistena Mitawin, which means to show respect, help grow your cultural competency and leadership? As I said, breaking bias starts with education and understanding, labeling and calling it out. But it also means calling others in. And I'll share a story that demonstrates what I mean by this on slide 15. When I first joined BMO nearly 10 years ago, I used to frequently present on unconscious bias in the workplace. And to demonstrate how we consciously seek ways to blend in, I would joke about my own conformity in the workplace, my attempts to blend into a sea of the staple navy blue suits we see at so many conferences and events with my own navy blue suit, and not call out myself as an Indigenous woman. One thing I learned is sometimes we don't consciously realize all the ways we attempt to blend in until someone in a leadership position gives us permission to step out of the mold. For me, early in my time at the bank, we were hosting a special event with a nationally recognized Indigenous leader speaking. I wore traditional beaded earrings with my blue suit for the introduction I gave to that talk. Afterwards, one of the most senior leaders at the bank came up to me and said, "Beautiful earrings, you should wear those more often." Sounds simple, right? Beautiful earrings, you should wear those more often. But with those few simple words, he gave me so much. An acknowledgement and an affirmation of my identity, of my difference. What he told me with those few words was that I was seen, and moreover, my identity, my difference was valued. So when you reflect on how you can cultivate Kistena Mitawin, showing respect to break the bias, yes, it means calling it out. And it also means calling people in, like the BMO leader did with me. Think about ways you can call people in and recognize the value of their differences. The third and final Cree concept I want to share today on slide 16 is Oske Sichigehen, which literally translates as the creation of something new, or summarized as innovation. Sometimes we break bias simply by taking a seat at the leadership table in the boardroom, and sometimes we do it by setting the table aside altogether to step back and step out. Because to break bias, we don't just want to progress our current corporations, systems, and institutions, we want to transform them. And I'll share 2 examples of how we've stepped out of the box when it comes to breaking barriers and bias to progress Indigenous equity and inclusion at BMO. On slide 17, the first example I want to share is the creation of Nisto Tumwin, an e-learning introduction to understanding Indigenous perspectives in Canada. Nisto Tumwin literally means understanding in Cree. We all need to grow cultural awareness and understanding in our institutions, including Indigenous cultural awareness. Nistotumwin does just this, providing an introduction to understanding 500 years of colonial history in Canada from Indigenous perspectives in under an hour. It provides an introduction to understanding who Indigenous peoples are, treaty and nation-to-nation agreements that formed Canada as the country we know today, residential school history and impacts, economic reconciliation, opportunities, and more. So many participants have remarked that they'd wished they'd learned this history in school, rightly wondering why this history has not been taught. So here's a couple of ways we innovated on this initiative. First, we ensured the project was Indigenous-led. We partnered with First Nations University of Canada and co-created a tailored e-learning, including engaging Indigenous employees at the bank through the Sharing Circle, BMO's employee resource group. Second, we wanted to create a multimedia learning experience that was highly engaging, not just facts, but emotionally compelling and accessible. We wanted to call on people's hearts and minds to awaken an authentic desire to want to learn more. And the results you see here speak for themselves. We had one of the highest participation rates in the e-learning with near 90% completion. That's almost 28,000 employees, with 92% saying they would recommend the course. In fact, employees loved it so much, they wanted to share it with family, friends, customers, and their communities. So in partnership with First Nation University of Canada, we made Nistotumwin a free educational resource available for the public for the month of June in 2021 in acknowledgement of National Indigenous History Month. And in 1 month alone, another 20,000 people accessed the course. Many BMO clients and non-clients, teachers, nurses, and others provided positive feedback. They were surprised and delighted that a bank was offering free educational resources to progress Indigenous understanding, equity, and inclusion. So with nearly 50,000 people having completed Nistotumwin and ongoing demand, we are now looking to relaunch it as a free public resource in partnership with First Nations University of Canada this year. And I think I saw a comment fly in asking about that. So we'll circle back with you. Stay tuned for more on this. There is a link at the end of my presentation where you can get updates on making this educational resource free again for the next few years, coming soon this year. In addition to education, on slide 18, I want to highlight another innovative initiative at the bank of which I'm incredibly proud and which was highlighted in the Globe and Mail last month. Restart is a skills development program that builds digital-first, future-focused skills through a 12-week boot camp. This new employment initiative brings together 3 BMO commitments. The first is our leadership and commitment to a skills-based labor market, reflected in our participation in the World Economic Forum Skills Link Alliance, of which we became a founding member last year, together with a community of leaders around the world who are committed to a reskilling revolution aiming to provide 1 billion people with improved education, skills, and job opportunities by 2030. The second is BMO's commitment to zero barriers to inclusion, with diverse workforce representation goals across diverse segments by 2025, including the growth of Indigenous representation. In the last year alone, we've doubled Indigenous hiring against this goal. And the third, and perhaps most critical, is an aim to overcome barriers Indigenous employees have told us are critical to retention in the workplace, and that is displacement from home, family, and community in order to access employment. You see, for many First Nations living on reserve, many in northern and remote communities, they often need to leave their families and home communities to access employment. Coming from a remote northern community myself, this is something I'm particularly passionate about. As such, a core pillar of our Indigenous employment strategy was to create remote and virtual work opportunities. This was one good thing to come out of the pandemic. Working remotely quickly became a widely accepted norm. So in January of this year, BMO launched the Restart program, which brings together these three commitments. This differentiated program was introduced in partnership with AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, and Plato, the only Indigenous-owned software testing company in the country that grows technology skills across Indigenous communities nationwide. The program is demonstrating innovation in two key ways. It's entirely virtual with Indigenous participants from the East Coast through to the prairies, with both those on and off reserve and some in northern and remote communities. So it's breaking bias and barriers. It's developmental. Participants progress from a 12-week training program to a full-time 6-month paid internship with the goal of full-time employment with opportunities for upward mobility in the future. I hope these two examples of Oskisichigen of innovation inspire you as they do me. Your leadership means you are in positions of influence to create a culture and organization of Oskisichigen, a culture that enables others to take risks and try something that's never been done before. Our corporations need to continue to innovate and transform because we as people, as society, and as a global community continue to change and evolve. How we do so will be shaped by us as leaders, by our actions. So in closing, on slide 19, I leave you with these three Now Cree concepts, which serve as a call to action to grow your cultural competency muscle and leadership. Ototamithawin, openness to all things. Kistenamitawin, to show respect for others, inclusive of their differerences. Oskisichigen, to create something new. These three actions together go hand in hand. Each enables and reinforces the others. We know that our differences create stronger organizations. And I'm proud of how our leadership at BMO has been able to create a more open organization through our innovations, education that grows openness and respect, and employment that breaks the bias by directly addressing systemic barriers. We are each change makers in our organizations. And I would say for myself, I've always been purpose-driven throughout my career, and I've always aimed to make an impact. But it wasn't until I was encouraged to expand and draw on the strengths of my Indigenous identity, my differences, that my leadership became truly innovative. You could say I broke out of my navy blue suit. I invite you to do the same. Egose. Back to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Kona. I'm just waiting to get spotlighted here. Wow. You saw the text messaging going. I was getting texting. All I can say is thank you for sharing how we can actually create our own cultural competency as leaders. You truly inspire us. And I know we'll all go away more educated, and hopefully we can help all break the bias as a community together. So thank you, Kona. I am now going to turn it over to our panel discussion. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Vanessa Leverance. Vanessa is the Chief Inclusion Officer for BMO Financial Group. She holds enterprise-wide accountability to drive change strategies, education, practices, and programs across the company and grow a culture of belonging with zero barriers to inclusion. She is also a co-sponsor of BMO's Canadian Black Professionals Network Employee Resource Group. Vanessa is committed to making a difference across our community with a growth mindset and is a champion for long-term strategic change. Her experience in global human resources spans both financial services and the music entertainment industry. She has held roles in strategic workforce management, people analytics, executive and employee compensation, and governance, pensions, and benefits. Currently, Vanessa serves as the president of the Greater Toronto Area Rewards Association and volunteers throughout her local community supporting mental health, youth-based programs, cancer support agencies. She's an avid golfer who enjoys skiing and spending time with her 2 adult daughters. So Vanessa, I don't know where you find time for all of that, but over to you. I know we have some very dynamic conversations ahead of us. So thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks, Deborah. I appreciate that. And I'm so excited to be here today, and especially being part of this esteemed panel and getting to know Lori and Helen a little bit more and their experiences. So let's just right off the bat, let's just get to know Helen and Lori. A little bit about you and your professional career. So if I can ask Helen, could you share?
Miigwech. Ani Bojo, I'm joining you from the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, the Great Lakes, the heart of Mother Earth. I am Anishinaabe Kwe. I am the daughter of an Anishinaabe Nene and a settler mother. I'm a mother, a wife, a sister, grandmother, and a friend. I'm a potter, a master's athlete, and a lover of the outdoors. And I'm an Indigenous woman who is proud of my heritage, frustrated about government legislation aimed at extinguishing my family, and concerned about my safety when I am out alone. I am a CPA, a fellow actually of CPA Ontario, recognized in 2019, but I'm also on the board of directors of Health Sciences North, which is a regional hospital here in Northeastern Ontario. On that board as well, I'm the chair of the audit committee and vice chair of the finance committee. I'm also on the board of directors for AFOA Ontario and AFOA Canada. And I'm on the investment committee for the Indigenous Growth Fund, the first of its kind in Canada, which is a $100 million investment fund that provides access to capital for Indigenous entrepreneurs through a network of Aboriginal financial institutions across Canada. I'm passionate about increasing the health and well-being and the economies of Indigenous communities. And I'm passionate about sharing my financial knowledge with those who haven't gained it otherwise in their life journey. Ninotut Bakshkagan Mikansan Dijnakas. My spirit name is She Who Mends Broken Paths. And I'm really happy to join you, honored to share my experiences with you. And I say Miigwech, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Helen. What an esteemed background, and thank you for sharing a little bit about you. Lori, let's hear about your professional career and about you.
Hi, I'm always humbled coming after Helen. But Lori Ann Beausoleil, I've spent most of my working career at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I recently retired, and I've started the board journey. And the board journey has led me to, which I've been fortunate to, a couple of my clients, Canadian Apartments REIT, where I've just taken over as audit committee chair and board member. I do Brookfield Real Estate Income Trust in the US. So now that travel is open and I'm not a leper anymore, if I say I've been to New York, I look forward to enjoying that appointment. And I'm the audit committee chair there as well. And I've recently joined the Metro Foods Board out of Montreal. And last but not least, I'm really proud of Slate Office REIT. Looking forward to some really exciting times there as we expand globally. So why Lori for this panel? I am passionate about inclusion. I am here because I want to see, and I don't want to have to talk about bias anymore, because I want to see the rainbow. When I left PwC, I said my goal and my legacy is to open enough doors, help people get through the doors, so I won't have to sit on a panel like this anymore, because the rainbow will be there. And we have to start with one of the most important positions, and that's being a board member. So I'm looking forward to my board journey and the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Helen. I really appreciate all of the experience that you have, and looking forward to this conversation with both of you on your board journeys, and maybe all of us can walk away with a few nuggets of knowledge and know that we're not alone. And so I have a few questions for you, and really encourage you to share with everybody that's listening today, because we can all learn something from your journey as well. So Lori and Helen, looking back when you started thinking about joining a board, how did you actually get started? And that's from like making the decision to do that and starting to look for board opportunities to apply for. And I'd love to hear how you started that journey. Lori?
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
So my career over 36 years included governance consulting. I did a lot of regulatory and compliance work. So I reported into a lot of boards. So I was fortunate in that I'd been in the boardroom for 36 years, that I developed relationships, not just with the C-suite, but with the board members, as I became a trusted advisor to them as well. So when I made the decision to retire and to take on this journey, I actually called the CEO at Brookfield Global, who had just recently retired, said, "Hey, I'm here." And he said, "Oh, I've got an opportunity for you." Was very lucky as well, because CapREIT is one of my clients. And over the years, they said, "Lori, when you make the decision to retire, there'll be a board seat for you." Metro Foods reached out to me through a headhunter. And how small is my world? One of my retired partners is also on that board. But at that point in time, it was more an introduction through a headhunter. And so I would say to you, how did I get on boards? And this is something I want everybody to take away. Network. My network was what pushed me forward at a pace quicker than I thought. And you say, how did you start your network? And I encourage for all the younger women and men on this call, start today, because it's that network who's going to open the doors for you in whatever your board journey looks like, for profit, publicly traded, not for profit. So when I reflect, I had a network of individuals that put me forward. And so that's how I would say the journey began, and here I am today.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Networking is critically important. Helen, can you tell us a little bit about how you started your journey? And
Sure thing. So when I was in my 20s, I worked with Industry Canada, and I was actually hired as the very first Indigenous person with Industry Canada and their Aboriginal Business Canada program. And throughout my 20s and while I worked there, I actually ended up on a number of boards and committees aimed at Indigenous economic development, because people saw me as this Indigenous person who had some knowledge that could be shared. But then in my 30s, I had a child. And children, I discovered, change everything. I also became a single parent by the time my child was 1. So I really did make parenting a top priority, and I stepped away from board and committee work because I felt I had to put my child first. And I was already working as a self-employed accountant. So really my priority was my child and my accounting work. And I even got to a point where I told my clients, I don't travel. I took my son when he was a baby, I took him with me when I was able to, but once he got into school, I just said, no, I don't travel. You're going to have to work within the time I have. And I was fortunate to have clients who really understood that. But my practice was really about working on the ground with individual First Nation communities and not-for-profit organizations. So I felt like I didn't really have the opportunity to meet with corporate boards or Crown Corporation boards. That I was working with First Nation councils, which is its own governance body within the communities. But that really was my focus. And I just felt like I had my head down and I was working. And that's all that mattered. Mm-hmm. But over time, AFOA Canada, which is an organization, a not-for-profit organization that works on developing the capacity of Indigenous administrative professionals and managers. Over time, I became involved with them, and I wrote a number of articles for them for their Journal of Aboriginal Management, spoke at national and Ontario chapter events. And when I was able to travel more, I did attend their events periodically, became a part of the AFOA Ontario chapter board. And then just this past February, actually, I was elected to the AFOA Canada as as a representative of the Ontario chapter. But really, like, the idea of getting back into boards came to me in 2020, just before the pandemic was, announced. My child by then was 16, and I had recently remarried. So I was really at a different point in my life where my teenager was somewhat independent. He could take care of himself. He could put his own clothes on. he could feed himself somewhat. And I really had the support from a husband who was really wanted to help me achieve my goals, which is something I had never really experienced before. And at the time, I was approached by an Indigenous executive recruiter for a board position. And it wasn't really a fit for me at the time, but she was the one who impressed upon me that being on boards and on paid boards in particular is an opportunity that many men plan for in their retirement. And she said, listen, Helen, you really, you're getting up there in age, you're getting closer to retirement. I really think you should consider paid boards as an opportunity to supplement your income during retirement. And that is something that I had never even thought about. It never occurred to me. And I did see men with the ICD behind their names. And she said, that's what all of these men are doing. They're preparing for a board journey once they're retired. So I thought about it, and then it's all serendipitous for me, I feel. Not long after that, a friend of mine who worked at Health Sciences North sent me the posting for the board. And I thought, oh, maybe this is a way to start building my board resume, but also increase the Indigenous voices at the board table. Because HSN serves a really large region that has quite a large Indigenous population. And I know from working with the First Nations that there were definitely some issues between the Indigenous health organizations and the hospital, and transitions for patients going back home. So I applied for the job or for the position. I also applied for a governor and council appointment. That's still kind of in the works. So who knows what'll happen ever with that one. But I ended up getting, after an interview, I got the offer to get onto the board. And it wasn't until after that I found out it's supposedly, it's a status, position to be on the board for the hospital. And it was never something that had even occurred to me again. I just thought, oh, okay, I can, contribute some of my knowledge to the board. And at the same time, I was starting to try to figure out, okay, where can I build my, some more of my knowledge around being on the board and the responsibilities of board members. And being an accountant, I already knew the financial end, but I was more interested in hearing more on the risk management side. And I had some pretty strong planning skills because I did a lot of strategic planning. So I just thought, okay, let's start looking. And as a CPA, I found that there was an event called Finding Your Next Board Opportunity that CPA Ontario put on, and Deborah Rosati was one of the speakers. And I wasn't able to attend the workshop because I had some conflicts. So I just searched Deborah Rosati's name and found Women Get on Board in their mentoring program. So I looked it up and I thought, you know what, I'm going to invest the money in myself and my future, and signed up for the mentoring program. And it's been almost a year really since I've been in the program. I got paired up with a great mentor, Wendy Kay, and she's been really helpful to me and provided a lot of insight into some personal issues that I've had and how to navigate around them with the board responsibilities. It was a year ago yesterday that I had sustained a brain hemorrhage. And it was at the same time that the board, it was probably 3 weeks after that I got the call for an interview for the board. And I thought, what do I do? I have no idea if I'm even going to be able to function at the level that I had when I applied, that I thought I had when I applied for the position. So I've had some really good conversations with Wendy about how do I do this? I at one point I had thought about withdrawing from the mentoring program, but I thought, well, this is just a small speed bump And the program is a year long, so I thought I could still benefit from it. And Wendy's really been a great help to me, and just navigating some of the issues around the hospital and how much do I release to the hospital about the fact that I don't know if I can even, because I even had some surgery planned like the week following my interview. And she said, you know what, just be transparent with them. You don't have to give them any details, but just let them know you're going in for some surgery, and there's always a risk. Whatever your surgery is, there's always a risk that something could go wrong. And I came out of it fine, and I'm still recovering from the brain injury, but I'm I can carry out the responsibilities of a board member. So I really, I value the input that I got from Wendy, and I really feel like everything happens for a reason. And the sequence of everything that happened in 2020 to get me on the HSN board, to participate in the mentoring program with Women Get On Board, really fell in line for me. And I feel like I'm really lucky for that help on that journey.
Well, thank you, Helen. And thank you for sharing your story. And it's between Lori and Helen, your how you arrived to being on boards, very different journeys. And that's telltale that every journey is personal, and how you get there is your own personal journey and your priorities as you're moving forward. I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about describe how you've shown that you're more than, there's the conversations about cultural competencies, and we mentioned that earlier on. But how do you show up? Because one of the questions that people have is that how do you show up as more than a check mark for a board diversity opportunity or a board opportunity? Because there's a lot of conversations with shareholder investors and others about diversity on boards. And how do you approach that? And what advice do you have for everybody listening today? Helen?
Thank you. I never know who should start first.
I know.
So, and I feel like currently my board journey is really around the public sector. And definitely in my experience as an Indigenous person, there's always that question of, okay, am I a token here? And the term that we use in the Indigenous communities, am I a token Indian? And I feel like because I've worked in the public sector all of my life, and I have a reputation for working in the public sector, people know the skills that I have and the principles that I live by and work by. So I don't know if anybody's ever really asked me to be a token for them. They probably get more than what they're expecting though. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because definitely, like with the example with HSN, I am persistent when it comes to making sure that they're like, really for the board. I really want to see what are they doing for diversity and inclusion within the whole hospital operations. And so I'm persistent with them. When I had my interview, I asked them like, I looked at their strategic plan to see what are their diversity and inclusion goals. And in my interview, I asked them what are their strategies to improve access to diverse communities? Mm-hmm. How many of your board members have completed Indigenous cultural competency training? What are the plans to get that board the cultural competency training? And I just keep hammering at them, wearing them down.
Yeah, you do your research about the culture that you're going into from a board position. Lori, do you have any perspectives, or I know you do have perspectives, but what are your perspectives on this particular question?
I mean, it's a tough question because here's the dilemma. In order to get, let's say, ethnic, I'm now moving from the gender to the race conversation, but gender or race, you have to be the first. And does the first mean you're a token? For the publicly traded companies, there are skills that you have to have. So you can't just put your hand up and say, hey, I'd like to be on a board, and you get the opportunity. You really have to come to the board with a certain skills. And I really believe that we're at an opportunity where we have Indigenous and Black community excellent executives, but they may not have all of the required skills. Put your hand up and start the journey. And part of that journey, when I talked about, is also getting those skills that are required to be on the board. For those that have put up their hand and are sitting on boards, just as Helen said, you've got a job. So your job is to make sure that company's ROI for all of those investors is as high as possible from a business acumen perspective, but the investment community is also looking at diversity under the ESG mandate. But regardless, even if it didn't exist, you got to look and say, do we have the best talent? And I'm going to pause there because talent looks different. So I'm going to pause again dramatically. Do you have the right talent? And we know that diversity, a diverse team, can bring a solution, strategic or otherwise, that is better than a homogeneous group. So I would hope that that would be taken as a next step, but not as a token, but as a added value add member helping the board navigate the strategic journey.
I think that's really important. And one of the questions as you were talking, both of you were talking, was asking is, like, with your board roles now, how do you influence cultural competencies on those, in those organizations that you are a board member of?
For me, it's been, for me, it's been interesting, and not all boards are the same. So I would say that a couple of the boards already have been on the journey. When I look at the executive team, it's very diverse, gender as well as race. And so I would say they're on the journey. But here is the big issue. That's today. What about tomorrow? I spend a lot of my time, whether I'm on the GNC committee or on the HR committee, asking, I want to understand succession. So for those that have done well in 2022, what's coming for 2032? Where is that succession plan? So how is that succession going to work? And just to make sure we continue with that diverse pool. On the boards, on the GNC, I think, you know, the investment community has spoken. They want the best, and the best is diverse. So how are we going to move forward, and what does those succession positions look like? Who's in our pipeline? And so I think that's how I contribute to that conversation.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Helen.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned already how persistent I am within the board discussions about the cultural competency and serving diverse communities. And I know with HSN recently, they mentioned that they are going through the recruitment process again. And the question was, okay, who are we targeting to recruit? You know, we have X number of women, we have 2 Indigenous people now. I don't see any LGBTQ members of the community here. You know, we really need to focus on getting people who have the skills that we need on the board, but also have representation in these other marginalized communities, I would say. Because without them at the table, we also can't, we just don't know, we don't understand what other communities are really experiencing.
And so, and Helen, can you talk a little about, there was a concept that I've heard, wisdom trumps knowledge, and how this can add value to a board?
I'm happy to talk about that because there are some Anishinaabe teachings around wisdom that I feel is really important. So first of all, for me, like, there's knowledge is something that you gain through various means, whether it's formal schooling, workshops, discussions like this, or just observing the world, where it's how I use the knowledge that really shows wisdom. And the 7 sacred teachings are, I'll say them quickly if I can remember. So there's wisdom, obviously, love, humility, bravery, honesty, and respect and truth. And wisdom, Nabokawin, is one teaching. These are all principles or values that anybody can really live by. But wisdom, you can't have wisdom without having all of these, without using all of these other teachings in your life, like love, humility, bravery, honesty, respect, and truth. So I look at it as, we use honesty in knowing where we excel, what our limits are. We use humility in understanding that other people have wisdom that we may not have, that we don't have, and we need to work with and work and collaborate with them to supplement what we lack. And we use bravery to make difficult decisions for the people that we're working for, or that we have some level of responsibility for. So I think about a board, and like if there's, say, 10 directors on a board, combined, they possess a wealth of knowledge. But if they used wisdom with love, honesty, humility, bravery, respect, and truth, I have no doubt that the decisions that would be made at the table are best for the organization and the people that they serve. And I know it sounds like a utopia or a dream, and maybe it is, but I know I can use my wisdom and my voice at the table to make change. And if each one of us can use our own wisdom that we've accumulated, then we can accomplish so much more in this world. And I really feel like that really is the difference between wisdom, is just using that knowledge in a really good way.
Yeah, for positive change, to influence that from a more inclusive, when we're looking across all of the boards and that type of thing. There's one thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about how you influence cultural competencies. All of us who may be on that board journey, how do we go about demonstrating having the right skills and experience? Because I think, Lori, you had mentioned about showing up with the right skills or acquiring those right skills and experience to earn a position on a board. I would love to hear your perspectives for all of us as we're on that journey as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because guess what? The skills are changing. So before, the skills were very limited, hence the barrier to somebody that looks like me and looks like Helen. Because even though I'm a partner and I ran my own business, that CEO title I did not carry. So used to, one of the skills is you had to be a CEO. And then you had to, lead a strategy. And then, and so the skills were very different than what they are today. So think about what do we have to focus on? We got to focus on ESG. We've never gone out from a board governance skill set looking for people that understand the E as well as the social and governance. But that E now is so critical with new laws, et cetera, on climate and what we're doing to our land. So imagine, I never would have thought as an ESG guru that I could potentially be on a board, but that is a desired skill, because how can you give good direction to the CEO and the senior management team if you don't understand it yourself? Exactly. Technology, we're in a digital world. Who would have thought a skill that I think is critical to oversee the digital strategy or digitization? Now there's two words, digitization, digitalization. Digitalization is the strategy piece. See the things I've learned myself. That's critical. So that's a different skill from the traditional CFO, CEO skill set. That would have been, I'm going to say, maybe not even 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, guess what else is important depending upon your industry? Supply chain. If you're in a retail or grocery, imagine that supply chain and having somebody on your board that collectively, along with the other skill sets, I'm going to use the more traditional skill sets. So I'm saying, everybody, please don't think if you're not a CEO or you're not a CFO or a partner at a firm, you can't be on a board. You can be. And sometimes your board resume will actually make them rethink some of the skills they're looking for. So please do not open up your mind, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm saying that to boards, the ones that are really effective, the ones that now from a consulting perspective, those ones are going to be the next generation boards, because that's what's driving our strategy in corporate Canada today. So finance, legal, they'll always be there. But now we've got some really new ones and more to come.
Yeah, especially around the future of work. And Helen, how would you go about demonstrating the skills, that you have the right skills and experience?
Well, the other two I wanted to add to Lori's list of other skills is particularly in the natural resources industry. there's really a need to build relationships with Indigenous communities in the regions. So it's
real estate and real estate.
And real estate as well, yes. Anything that involves the land and like relationship building and the understanding of the Indigenous communities. And I think that you don't have to have a former position in the C-suite. And that's probably the last place you want to be if you want to be, building relationships with First Nations. But to answer your question, really when it comes to like demonstrating my skills for a board position, I do my homework and I take a look at the board posting and what skills are they looking for. And then I look at my skills and I really highlight in my value proposition, what skills do I have and have I developed that I can directly contribute to the board. And sometimes it takes a lot of thinking, because I feel like women and Indigenous women in particular are raised to not toot your own horn and to just almost be a wallflower and don't really share what you're capable of doing. And I know as an Indigenous woman, that's something that's always kind of, I myself have tried to not be noticed. So really we need to learn how to be honest with ourselves about the skills that we have and we can contribute to those companies, and then be truthful about it and let people know.
And so most companies I know BMO, we have a governance and nominating committee that looks at criteria. The first is on skills and experience. So it really resonates with me what both you, Helen, and Lori were saying. But as you're starting through your career, younger and mid-career, demonstrating those capabilities both in in a full-time paying job versus a nonprofit, is that a benefit in like doing something on volunteer, showing your activity and using your skills, whatever those might be, and your gifts that way? Do you think that was another way that a paying board, if you're looking at a paying board, would look at as something as to build and demonstrate your skills and experience?
Absolutely, because that not-for-profit board or charitable organization still has all of the challenges and issues that you have in corporate Canada. And nothing is better, in my humble opinion, than to have experience. So you can actually say, I've been in a boardroom. I've dealt with complex issues, whether it's in, healthcare or a youth community group. Absolutely. You follow your passion too, because you have to have the passion. Follow your passion, and all of that will bode well if you so decide. Not everybody does if you want to go in on the corporate public company side. But absolutely all day long. In fact, some of my early experience was at a polytech, which then became a university. And I use that in addition to my work experience as to say I've been in boardrooms, and I've actually been in ones that had a lot of complexities, such as students, et cetera. So absolutely, all day long.
That's great. Thank you, Lori. Helen, did you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with Lori. Okay. I do agree, because I feel like volunteering really does help you to build some of the skills that you need within organizations and within boards, regardless of, whether it's a not-for-profit or other non-paying role. But I also think it speaks to your character to really show that you're willing to give of your time and that you feel there's something important in the community that you can give yourself to and your time. And I think personally that's really important to again, the principles that you have yourself, to show that you are willing to give something of yourself within your community.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Completely agree with what you're saying. And I'm looking at both your board journeys and experience, and really would love to understand maybe the top 3 tips that you could offer all of us to enhance our board experience skills as we start planning, each of us, on our own board journeys, whether it's a paid board or a volunteer board. I'll ask Helen. You want to go first?
Sure thing. So the one thing which I heard in the Women Get On Board mentoring program is that your board resume looks very different from your employment resume. And your employment resumes typically highlight where you worked, what your accomplishments are, where with the board resume, you really do need to highlight your expertise and your skills that are applicable to the board. They don't want to see everything, every place you've ever worked at. They just want to see how can you apply those skills. The second, I guess, tip is change your perspective on your responsibilities. Like, when I think about myself, I thought of myself as I'm just a worker. I've got my head down. I'm just getting my job done. We aren't worker bees. I like to say we're all queen bees. And on the board, we're an advisor to management. We have to focus on strategic guidance that really we can provide to the organization. So it's really a shift in your thinking in what you're responsible for. And then the last thing, and it also comes back to the skill side, and take a really close look at your skills and assert what you bring to the table. When I first started trying to document my value proposition, I really had a difficult time doing it because I just saw myself as doing a job. But it took speaking with the recruiter for the departmental audit committees of the federal government before, and I was describing like all of the things that I've done. And she said, wow, like you've got all kinds of experience, working with different complex environments and doing this and this and that. And I said, well, yes, but just the way that the terminology they use was so different than how I saw myself doing the work. So I think we really need to take a close look at the skills and just use, how does it apply to the boards? And just know that, I mentioned earlier that sometimes we have difficulty tooting our own horns. Mm-hmm. And I think so I know myself, the last thing I want to do is stand out, but really we can use humility to say that we're no better than anybody else, but we can also be honest with ourselves about what we've contributed to our companies or our community and how we can contribute that and our true self to the boards.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I saw in the chat group before I turned to you, Lori, is that adapting your work resume to a board ready resume would be helpful. That was a nugget that I just took away from what you said, and I didn't want to lose that train of thought. So Lori, what are your top 3 tips for us?
My top 3 is, first of all, say that you want to be on a board. Which board? Because remember, not all boards are looking for the same skills, the same experience, and the same individuals. So do you want to be in financial? Do you want to be in real estate? I say first and foremost, not-for-profit, healthcare, youth community. Choose your passion is the very first one before you start the journey. Like, have an end game of where you want to play and bring your everyday life into that boardroom. Number 2 is then start the network. I mean, I'm telling you, if you're on a not-for-profit and then want to go to a corporate, you'll be shocked on the number of not-for-profit colleagues and friends that you've made that can help you with that next step. So always keep in mind, again, not doing it without being genuine and authentic and making sure everybody understands what your goals and aspirations are. And the third one is get a mentor or a coach, because there's a strategy to this as well. Take what Helen did with Women Get On Boards. They got a great mentorship program, but get that mentor to help guide you, coach you, and be with you through the journey. And remember, I use the word mentor, I should say mentors, because as you go through it, the mentors and coaches will change. But to your point, Helen, we as women are so shy to ask for help. We believe it's a weakness. I believe it's a strength. I'm asking you for your experience, guidance, coaching to help me achieve my aspirations. Nothing wrong with that. Put up your hand, ask, be passionate. It's one hell of a journey, but it is a lot of fun.
That's great. Wow. How inspirational. And we have 6 tips to all take away as we all venture on our own board journeys. And I'd like to wrap things up with a question for each one of you. What has been the best advice that you have been given in building your own board profile and mastering the board interview? And Lori, I'd invite you to share your perspective.
The best piece of advice that I got, and I'm going to laugh because I didn't actually understand it when it was given to me, is, Lori, what is your brand? You have to have a brand. And I'm like, I don't know what you mean. I don't understand that. And that was the best piece of advice, because in my day-to-day work, I started building my brand. I never thought about anything like that. Maybe others had. And I actually went back to him, a partner at PwC, 3 times. Like I said, oh, this is why. It was like, Lori, this is not a Webster Dictionary exercise. Like, what is it that you want to be? What is that brand? Excellence, deep knowledge in real estate, passionate mother, female leader, helping women manage their career with their children. You've done it. Bring it. That's the brand. And that brand is also going to help you excel in your board work. Best advice I ever got. It took me about 2 years to figure it out, mind you. But one of the best is, what is your brand, and that brand that you're bringing to your day-to-day job and eventually to the board, not for profit or otherwise. Was fantastic advice.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Helen, what's your best advice that you've received?
The one that really stuck to my mind and just, rang some bells for me was that you don't have to accept every position that's been offered to you, because once people get to know who you are and what you can do, the offers are going to be there. And reach for something that fits your passions, your interests and aspirations. And when you say no to some opportunities you're not interested in, give them the names of 3 other people who could be involved. And when you have that network that Lori has already mentioned, you've got the names of people who you could potentially suggest, and then you're still helping that organization, and they'll remember that later.
That's great. Thank you. There's a few nuggets of that you've shared today that I thought are fascinating, are wonderful for us all to remember. We make a choice as we're going through our career to either pursue a board role at a certain point in time or not. So that's, be honest with yourself, be true to yourself, and be kind to yourself. Get that mentor or a sponsor, mentors. Sorry, Lori, I correct myself. Because it's really important. And we have a broad network here. And everybody on this call, you've now just widened your own network as well. And really acquire those skills, and you learn from others as well. Lori and Helen have had different journeys on their becoming a part of boards. And so that's the power of a network, and that's a power of Women Get on Board as well. So I've learned so much today. I would personally like to thank Lori and Helen for all your insights, your experience, and your advice. Everything you said is so invaluable to me personally, and I hope that everybody on this call, and I'm sure that they did, took something away. Right now, so thank you so much. I bow to both of you. Thank you. So right now, I have got the distinct honor to introduce one of my colleagues, Sherry Griffith, BMO's Senior Vice President, Head of Ontario Canadian Commercial Banking. Sherry is responsible for leading Ontario's Canadian commercial banking team. She brings over 30 years of extensive retail and commercial banking experience to the role. She started a career in banking as a teller and has progressed through many roles in several locations during her journey, including relocating her family several times. Sherry holds an MBA from Dalhousie University and is an executive sponsor of BMO for Women, a program that supports and advances women in business. She leads our Commercial Banking National Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and supports BMO's commitment to building a future with zero barriers to inclusion. She has a deep passion for supporting women entrepreneurs, creating a culture of equality, and empowering everyone around her, having contributed. Sherry was named one of Canada's most powerful women by Women's Executive Network, WXN, in 2020. Sherry, I'm so honored to pass things over to you to announce the celebration honorees. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Greatly appreciate the introduction. And I have to say, I've been enjoying the conversation so much today. I always give value, but it's just fascinating to hear the tips and the suggestions that everyone has been sharing. I'm so excited that I get to be the one that introduces the women that have been selected as honorees today. I do want to give a bit of a background. Our BMO Celebrating Women program has been something near and dear to my heart, something that I'm particularly passionate about. We used to do these events in person in communities across the country, and they have evolved, of course, as you can imagine, especially during the pandemic. Over the last 2 years, instead of doing in-person events and honoring women in that way, we actually chose to pivot and move the BMO Celebrating Women events to actual grants for women business owners. That's been hugely gratifying to see the impact that we're having on women businesses as they've tried to pivot and come out of this pandemic. So really proud of that. We also, several years ago, in conjunction with Get On Board, we actually expanded our program to this, which is BMO Celebrating Women on Boards. I personally would love BMO Celebrating Women attached to everything that we can to honor the incredible women that we get to work with and see. So I'm particularly proud today to be announcing who these honorees are. We're going to be recognizing 2 women from Western and Central Canada and 1 from Eastern Canada. So starting with the West Coast, our first honoree is Bonnie Chartiquet. Bonnie is an experienced board director and an accomplished business owner and executive with over 30 years leading organizations through complex business transformations, including entry into public market, rapid growth mergers, acquisitions, leadership succession, and cultural change. As the founding executive member, Bonnie held the office of President of People Corporation, a publicly traded company acquired by Goldman Sachs. She currently serves as a board director for Cambrian Credit Union, Women's Enterprise Center of Manitoba, and the Youth Employment Services of Manitoba. She's recognized for her business knowledge and leadership and has been appointed to the advisory board for North Forge Technology Exchange and Regional Ambassador Council for Women Get On Board. Bonnie, please say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry, for that. I'm delighted to be honored for my board work professionalism, and I'm honored to be sharing the platform with other amazing board director women throughout Canada. I want to applaud BMO for having recognized this very, very important role that we play in Canadian organizations. And I also just, as an example of today's session, I just want to thank and recognize Women Get On Board for their tireless efforts for creating such a wonderful community of professional women board directors. So thank you so much. Honored to receive this award.
Thank you, Bonnie, and congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Our second honoree today from Western Canada is Judith Athad. Judith is a certified corporate director, professional engineer, and the president and CEO of the Cogent Group. She is currently a director of Computer Modeling Group, HSBC Canada, Quietnock Energy, NB Power, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and Tri-Summit Utilities. With more than 3 decades of experience in the energy and utility sector, she has honed her understanding of strategy and risk. Technology is an enabler for transformation and sustainable goals. Judith, congratulations. Please say a few words.
Sherry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Really
You're welcome.
I would say that I am truly delighted, and it is very humbling to be recognized by both BMO and Women Get On Boards for my service and governance. And I would say, like both organizations, I strongly believe in a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, one that's free of bias and discrimination. And really that world starts in the boardrooms of Canada. To my fellow directors on the call today, I would say to you, wherever you are in your journey, whether you're at the start of your journey, looking to launch into the boardroom, or you're already in the boardroom, I would say be ambitious with your dreams. And I would say thank you to BMO and Women Get On Boards for supporting us all in our dreams and our journeys.
Thanks, Judith. Moving on to Central Canada, Our first honoree is Denise Carpenter. Denise is an experienced board chair and director, C-suite executive, business strategist, and executive coach with broad experience in several business sectors. She has spent her career advocating for companies and governments on issues that matter most to Canadians. She is the incoming independent chair of the board of the Canadian Association of Blue Cross Plans, independent board director and chair of the HRCC of the Ontario Medical Association, board director of Cashco Financial, chair of the board director at Ronald McDonald House Charities, chair of the Toronto board of Enerforge, chair of the board Oshawa Power and Utilities Corporation, and vice chair of Synergy North. She's an active and accredited member of the Institute of Corporate Directors, the International Coach Federation and International Women's Forum. She's been honored by Global TV as a Woman of Vision, by the YWCA with a Women of Distinction Award, and has twice been named one of Alberta's 50 most influential people by Alberta Venture Magazine. Denise, please join us and say a few words.
Thank you so much. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Toronto, and I'm very honored to be here with women who I admire, all the honorees. The first thing I'd like to do is say, Sherry, thank you for your leadership in supporting the advancement of women in business. None of us would be where we are without people like you along the way. And Deborah, for your personal commitment to diversity and enabling women to gain a well-deserved seat at the board table. And thirdly, to my friend and collaborator, Richard Ellis, who nominated me for this honor today. I've come to realize that it's a journey. And if we all work together to bring more diversity of thought, more inclusion to the boardroom table, then we will be working to lift up society as a whole. And I really believe that as an individual and as corporations, we have a responsibility to each other and to all the young people who are coming up the ladder behind us. And I'm personally going to use this award as a tool to help and to encourage others to step up and help others along their way in their journey. And that's why I'm very proud to be here, because I believe we can use it. We can all use it as a tool to help others build diversity in the business environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Denise. Great comment. The second honoree from Central Canada today is Wendy Key. Wendy Key currently serves as board chair for Ontario Power Generation and is the chair of the audit committee for both Karora Resources and Noranda Income Fund. Ms. Key is a fellow chartered professional accountant, a fellow from the Institute of Corporate Directors, and holds a Bachelor of Mathematics from the University of Waterloo. In 2020, Ms. Key was named one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women, and in 2016 was selected as a Diversity 50 2016 candidate by the Canadian Board Diversity Council. Wendy, congratulations, and please say a few words.
Thanks, Sherry. Pleasure to be here with you. It's great to be here this afternoon, and a wonderful honor for me to be selected by my peers and recognized for the changes that I've made on the boards on which I serve. It means that my work to drive a greater board diversity is valued as an important way forward for Canadian organizations. That my dedication to develop the boards I lead, so they are filled with diverse experts with great skill sets who are engaged and eager to contribute, is seen as valuable. And that advocating for and mentoring other women who are just starting out in their board journeys, encouraging them to use their strengths, their voices, and their passions to expand their careers and to make their own indelible marks on the boards they serve, is deemed just as valuable to me as to my peers. It's incredibly fulfilling to know the work I do is meaningful and impacts the people and organizations I serve in a positive way. It gives me great sense of purpose, and is marvelous to know that there are so many other women board leaders who have the same drive and dedication. I am truly honored to be recognized among this group of amazing talented, and accomplished women board leaders. Thank you very much, Bank of Montreal and Women Get on Boards, and congratulations to my fellow honorees. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Well said. Last but not least, our final honoree today from Eastern Canada is Robin Tingley. Robin Tingley is the chair of the Board of Governors of the University of New Brunswick. She is also an honorary lieutenant colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces and a founding member of Women for 50%, an initiative that encourages more women in the Provincial Assembly. Through her management consulting firm, Glass Sky, she blends her experience as a top global executive for a Fortune 100 with her passion to help progressive employers build modern and inclusive workplaces. Her work to advance gender equality has been recognized with awards by government and business in Europe, the United States, and Canada. She's also a sought-after speaker who in the last 24 hours has addressed audiences across Europe, Asia Pacific, and North America to encourage them to break the bias. Robin, congratulations. Please say a few words.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. This has been an exciting last hour and a half. I've enjoyed it immensely. Sherry, Deborah, thank you so much for the work that you do to shine a spotlight on the work that we do. I've been involved and seen the work that BMO does to celebrate women right across this country, and it's absolutely tremendous, not just on International Women's Day, but every single day. So sincere thanks for this recognition. I am humbled. And along with Women Get on Board, I know tirelessly you're working to encourage women to present themselves for more board opportunities, to step up to the call of service. And you're not only encouraging them, you're teaching them how to do that. So I'm very humbled. Thank you. Keep going. I also want to congratulate all of the other honorees this afternoon. Your work is very inspiring. I admire it, and I will be continuing to watch your careers. I do want to shout out to Lori and Helen. That advice was absolutely golden. So thank you for sharing it and for giving us a peek inside your journeys. And really, I was asked to think about what this means to me. And I think it means keep going. Keep going. And to use a phrase that Kona used, call people in. I love that, Kona. Call people in, call more women in to the mission of board service, because there is no more important board. There is no more important room that we think about to drive inclusive workplaces. So that is what I'm going to take away, and that is what I'm going to commit to do and redouble my efforts on that front. So thank you, and just blessings to everyone.
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate that so much. I'm just in awe. Honestly, reading through and being able to celebrate these women has been a great honor for me. I'm so impressed with the work they do, and I certainly want to encourage them to continue as all of us continue the work that we do. I would really like to thank Kona for sharing her personal and professional experiences that really highlighted how we overcome barriers and really focus on that work. Our panelists and moderator today, as you said, Robin, Lorianne, Helen, and Vanessa, that conversation was so invaluable, so many great tips, and really from such an honest place of trying to support and help, and so greatly appreciated. Thank you. I do have to thank Deborah. You've been an incredible partner. We appreciate that so much, and you do an incredible job of helping co-host and get these events put together, and we appreciate the honor of working with you on this. For everyone here, obviously celebrating International Women's Day this week is something that we all are honored to be a part of. And I think it is something where we can continue to break that bias and pull people in. So thank you for that. I hope everyone enjoyed the event today. Congratulations again to all of the honorees, and thank you. Have a wonderful evening.